Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick edit of our Outdoorsman workshop photos. I grabbed 3 photos here, and I'm just going to kind of walk through them, show you a little bit of my logic. I'll hang out down here in the bottom right of the corner. I'm just going to go through it. So these are from the Outdoorsman workshop. I got one of our hunters. I got another one of our hunters, just kind of low angle, and then kind of a rough one of our fishermen. So I'll start off with our hunter here. First little thing, right away, right click on your background and you can kind of change it to be brighter or darker, right? I always like to have it kind of light gray. It kind of helps me see the colors a little bit better. And if I want the image to be brighter, like this image, I always like to have the reference over here. But light gray, medium gray kind of helps. So first thing I'm going to do right away is crop in some. So right about there, let's see what that looks like. Push them over a little bit. Again, you want that open space going towards where their eyesight is, or their eye line is, or where they're walking towards, really, and not crop off any of this other stuff. So white balance, I think, is good. You can kind of zoom in and see a little bit. I think the white balance is good. I probably will warm it up a little bit here in a minute. But what I'm going to go to first is the tone curve. So on the left side here, I'm going to raise up my whites a little bit. I'm going to make 3 points. And I'm just going to raise them all up just a tad. And what this does, not that. What this will do, just kind of brighten up the image, open up the whites, open up the black levels some. This is always you got to be a little careful here because it's so sensitive. Let's see on my right side here. Should I bring this? Nah, I'll leave that there. I've already gone through this once, but I used one of my presets that I made and then I jumped into it. So I'm trying to do it from scratch. All right, so just right away looking at that, opens up the shadows a bit, opens up the blacks a bit, kind of gives me a good idea. I'm not gonna mess with tone mixer just yet. All right, so I'm gonna go over to color grading. And so you have your shadows, midtones, and highlights. And so this adds color within the area. So if you're wanting to warm up the image a little bit without just doing the general, warming up for your white balance, this is usually where I go. And so my rule that I usually go to, I usually put around orange, and you can go through each one get real specific with it. So my shadows, I'm about 46. My saturation, I'm just gonna go up just not too much, but if you look right away, you can kind of tell just right away that difference. It's more subtle. And so my shadows brought up, I got hue is about 46. So let's look at that overall. Okay, that's not too bad. All right, let's go over to our midtones. The midtones, usually I match that. So I'll probably go down to 46 to keep it around the same one. And then bring my saturation up just some. There we go. Let's go to about 15. So again, right away, we got a little bit warmer, and you can see, like looking at this weird area by the rocks right there. So you see your midtones and the shadows, you have a little bit of color in it there. And then what I'll do with my highlights is I'll usually go opposite. So I'll probably go teal here. So let me bring that saturation way down. So let me find that, and then I'll add a little coolness in the highlights. Not a lot. Yeah, right about there. And let me check that. So you'll see I'll constantly turn it on and off to make sure I'm not like oversaturating or going crazy on that. All right, so color grading's kind of mapped out, cropped in, did a little bit on that. So let's go up here to our big overall adjustments. So highlights, bring it down just a tad. Let me open up my shadows some. And instead of bringing up the exposure right away like that, I'll bring up my whites some here, and then my blacks down a little bit. So right away, let's look a little bit better. So a little more true to color. The accuracy is better. Good thing is you can look at the red on that scope. You see it's a little more accurate for what it was in person, right? Let me get back to it. And I'm going a little fast here because I want to go through all of these. My dehaze, depending on what this is, you can add a lot more contrast or open it up a lot more. Usually what I do is I'll bring it down just a tad to make it a little bit brighter, right around 10. And again, that just kind of brightens it up a little bit, opens things up some more, because I'll be able to add contrast in here in a second. So vibrance, remember, so vibrance and saturation. Saturation brings all the colors in the whole image up. Vibrance only brings up the colors that are naturally in the photo. I'm not going to mess with these too much though right now. So I'm going to go down to my color mixer. The hues, I'm not going to mess with too much. There's not a lot of reds in this image. There is a lot of orange and yellow, and you can really mess around with that. But let me go over to my luminance first. And so I won't add contrast in right away because it just looks not natural, right? But if you go to your luminance, you can luminance, what it does is just brighten or darken specific color areas. This really helps when you have a lot of oranges and a lot of yellows in your image. And so for these, we have a lot of yellows and oranges. And so mess with that a little bit. I'm going to brighten up my yellows just a tad, and the greens, bring it down just a tad. The aqua, there's none of that in there. The blues are not really any of that. Same with purple and same with magenta. All right, so I'm looking at oranges again. Oranges you got to be a little careful with, especially when skin tones, because if you bring up your oranges a lot, you can see right here, he's facing away from us, so it doesn't affect him too much, but I like to brighten that up just a tad. And same with reds, especially like around the ears, eyes, stuff like that. All right, so let's go over to saturation. So then with saturation, I'll bring up the reds just a tad. The effective area is pretty small. And my oranges, this is where we got to be careful with because there's so much orange in this. So I don't want to go too unnatural, but I'm going to bring up just a tad. And same with yellows, right? I can really make it look kind of goofy. And so I'm going to leave it as is, maybe bring it down just a tad. And greens. All of these, I always go up and down a lot to kind of see the area of effect. And so my greens, I'm going to kind of leave alone. I might punch it up just a tad. Aquas, there's no aqua in here that's really effective, so I'm going to turn it all the way down. And same with blue. You'll see a lot of time blue will show up in shadows. And so my blues, I can go up, but then you get this fringing of the colors, so the chromatic aberration where it kind of overlaps or makes it look weird. So I'm actually going to bring that down some and make sure, there we go. Okay, so my blues, purples, and magentas, I don't think there's really much of any of that in here, are my hues. Let's see if I need to mess with the orange any. No. Yellows, you can make your yellows look more green. So if you have a really nasty field that you're shooting and everything's dead, you can kind of turn your yellows into green. I'm going to leave my yellow alone. I might push it a little bit towards the orange. And keep in mind when you do this on the hue, it'll also affect whenever you do the saturation because it's pushing the colors into that area. So I'm going to leave a lot of these alone. I did my color grading. Detail, I'm not going to take any noise out of this. I shot at 125 ISO, so it's pretty clean. I got some specks and bugs, things like that, but I'm going to leave that alone. Lens correction, I'll do this sometimes, so enable profile correction and just maps the profile. One thing I always do, it pushes in or out that center area. I don't like that, so I always bring the amount down. And vignetting for the edges of it. So I'm going to bring it back down a little bit. So, all right, transform, I'm not messing with that. Lens blur, I'm not adding in blur. Effects, I don't need to add in grain. The calibration, basically how it processes or views colors. You can mess with this some. You can push the reds around, how it views more of the reds, so you can push it more into the orange. Same with the greens. Again, there's a lot of green and yellows in this. This is actually a cool area to work with whenever you have dead grass, a lot of dead grass, because you can make it look better or make it look worse, right? And same with blues. You can kind of save some of your stuff by pushing that blue primary. You see all those greens suddenly pop out a lot more. Do that a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to leave that alone. All right, next thing I want to do is a little masking. So he's bright, and back here is a little bright. I want to separate him from the background a little bit more. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on the background, let it auto mask it out, and then bring it down just a tad on the exposure, not much. You don't want to bring the exposure down too much because then it looks like this, and you never want it to look unnatural. Like my goal is always to make it look as natural as possible. So I'm going to bring that down, but what I will do is mess with the black levels some. The highlights some. The shadows a little bit. And the idea is just to get that background separated from him. But I want to make sure that it looks natural, right? So I'm going to go up here and subtract. I'm going to click brush. Do kind of a bigger feather. I'm going to show where the overlay is. And then what I'm going to do is subtract out. I'm going to make a really big brush so that way the edge is kind of subtle with it. I'm going to subtract out this foreground some to make it look like maybe there's a shadow behind him against that bridge there. So off, on, subtle, right? Not a lot to it, but just kind of gives you a little bit more separation. So let me see. Bring it down just a tad more. And then also, I'll probably bring down the saturation just a hair, like that. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. And so now we have the separation in the background. Again, we don't want it to look unnatural, but you want to have that clear saturation. And so if I want to get real particular, I want to do it with this one too much, doing some dodge and burn. I'd probably leave it right around here. And then the last thing, now I'll mess with the white balance a little bit. Bring it up just a little into the warm. Again, you want that subtlety there. You want it to look like more natural light. So if I go back, there we go. So yeah, just a little. See how that affects, and then pull out on that whole image. Then I bring the exposure down just a tad. There we go. And that's what I like. I'll leave it kind of like this. And then if I want to punch up the vibrance any, no, I'll bring the vibrance down just a, let me leave it there. All right, so for that image, I'm pretty much done with it. I could probably darken up the background a little bit more, give a little more separation. I'll show you what I'm going to do on the next one. All right, so let's jump over to our next shot. So I like the shot, Kai here looking majestic. And what I can do really is import over the same thing. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm just going to hit previous. So it's going to apply the same thing. Let me open up this image, though, because I want that full shot. So I'm not going to leave it like that. So obviously, not everything works for this, right? It's the same thing, but different. Let me remove the mask from the other one. There we go. So bright, punchy. What I'm going to do first is bring down the exposure some, like that. And really, I want to save the sky. And so I could create a mask just against the sky, but what I'm going to actually do is go down to my blues in the luminance section. So luminance right here, if I bring that down, you can see that I get that contrast back, but it's kind of an off blue. So I've got to remember my saturation. So let me bring that back up and bring aqua back up. Let's see what that hue looks like to make it a little bit more. There we go. So let me bring that blue right about there, and then I might punch up the saturation just a touch in the blues. There we go. And then again, I want to separate Kai from the background some more, and so I want to create a brush going against this. And so what I'm going to do is do a linear gradient like this, pull across, but I want to remove Kai. I don't want him to be affected by this. So what I'm going to do is, when you click on it, do subtract, and I'm going to click subject. So remove the subject from this, and you can kind of see how it highlights the subject when you hover over it. And so I got the subject removed. Let me take that overlay off. Bring down the exposure just a tad. Really bring the shadows down some more like that. So there we go. And our highlights. I don't want to affect the clouds too much, but do it kind of like that. There we go. And then I want to make Kai stand out a little bit more, so I'm going to do another mask with a brush. Make this one smaller, and I'm just going to color it in just a little bit down here. Do a little touch of that right there, and just bring this down just a little bit, kind of like the vignette around it. There we go. Make him stand out a bit more. Then if I want to get real fancy, I got Kai right here, so I'm going to do another brush. And then over here on the right side, you'll see there's a preset option. You can click that, and I'll go down to the burn and the dodge. So either burn, you want to darken the area, or dodge, you want to lighten the area. So I'm going to do a lighten one, and I'm going to go it down. And then what I'm also going to do is my flow and density, I'm going to bring down some, because I don't want it to be full blown. I just want to be a little bit more subtle. And all you want to do is accentuate the highlights or the bright areas and accentuate the dark areas. So I'm going to do a little bit right here across his chin. You can see right away that just adds a little bit of that brightness to it. Across his neck, some right here, and across the knuckles a little bit right there. Maybe a little bit on the gun as well, because you got that brightness coming in right here. So you just want it to kind of fall on where the light's at. And so that's something small, but I think it makes a bigger difference because you got that contrast. And then do another brush and do the darken area. So I'm gonna click darken, same thing, go up here a little bit. I don't want it to be too dark because I don't want to lose them, like in the shadows, but I'm gonna darken up this right side some, like that. So let's see where it's affected. There we go. Not super pretty. The brush, guy's pretty, but the brush, not so much, right? All right, so do a little bit on the right side right here. Again, this is just to add some more contrast. I'm gonna go back to the one where I did the brights. I'm gonna brighten up that a little bit. And over here as well. Again, this is just to accentuate the natural light coming in, make it a little bit more contrasty. That seems small, but I really liked how that kind of makes it pop a little more. So I had my shadows from the last one. I'm gonna open my shadows just a touch more without losing too much. You can always hold down Option, Alt. You can really see, especially with the white, so you can see where you start to lose contrast in it. With the clouds, I'm not too stressed about that. But when you start to lose too much detail in it, let me bring the shadows back down just a tad. And then my white balance is good. Do I want it warmer, darker, or cooler? I mean, I'm gonna bring it down just a little bit so I can get that in the clouds back. Yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna add a little bit of, actually that background I want a little bit darker. So let me go to that back mask again. Make it a little bit bluer too, just kind of pop that clouds out some more, and then bring the blacks down. There we go. We gotta be careful because I don't want it to look too unnatural. There we go, something like that. All right. Quick edit. You went from super warm, more natural skin tones like this. You can see the greens are quite a bit different in the background there. Some people may like, this is straight out of camera on the left, right? And then on the right side, you've got the edit. So a little more natural looking, more true to color. The greens are more true to color. All right, and then let's do this last photo here. So this one was that fishing one, little rough, right? You can see it's a good shot, but this was right when the clouds were moving over, so I didn't get a chance to adjust my settings. I'm, shooting a high frame rate. My ISO is pretty low. So first thing I'm going to do is bring up my exposure just like that. I don't want to go too crazy on this one. I'm going to start up here on the top a little bit. And let me go down my tone curve first, actually. All right, so bring this up on this right side. You're going to see you can go all the way up like this. What it does is just changes the white or the black level. And so this is true black, and you can bring it up just a tad. When it's super black like that, you can tell real quick that it's a fancy camera. So I like to give the illusion that you got some grain or something to it there. All right. And this chart on the left side, you'll see it's where the area of effect is. And you can refine the saturation some. When you add more blacks to anything or any whites adjustments like the base colors, it really messes with the colors. So right away, I kind of like that. Opens it up a bit more. I can tell there's quite a bit of vignetting on this. I zoomed in at 200 millimeters, so it's always going to have that. Let me jump down to fix that real quick in the lens correction. All right, there we go. Bring that distortion back and open up the corners just a tad. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go through and do the same thing that I've kind of done with the other ones. I'm going to start with my color grading. So shadows, I'm going to go over to 42, 43-ish. I'm at 45. Close enough. And then bring my saturation up just a tad like that. There we go. Again, you don't want to overdo this because it can real quick just blow everything out. And you can always pull it back some. So there we go. Around 17, that looks good. What was the number again? 45. All right, so I'm gonna do 45 here in the hue as well. So same kind of color I want to add to the midtones. And you can always type this in instead of trying to do it by mouse. And saturation, I'm gonna go until, there we go. This one will be a little bit more. There we go, I like that. Then I'm gonna do the opposite side. So we're going warm to cool. I could go all the way over here to the blue, but I don't want it quite that strong. So let me go up here more towards the teal. There we go. I'll bring my saturation up just right about, and let me bring it back down. There we go. All right, so let's go mess with the colors now. So I'll start here with my saturation. There's not a lot of red in this. You can see that right away. The orange, like I was saying earlier, the skin tones, you got to be careful with the orange. You don't want to go give them a sunburn, but then you don't want them to lose all their color here. So I'll bring that up just a tad. My yellows, I'm going to bring up just a little bit as well because I kind of like that look right there in the grass. Greens, it's going to affect those trees back there. And then the blues, you can see in the water right here, it hits that as well. So bring that blue up here. I'm saturating everything up here. Funny enough, the purple affects his shirt, usually from the shadows. And then magenta is not really touching anything, so aqua. So let's go over here to our luminance. Brightened a lot of this stuff up. So let me bring my oranges up. Again, this is a good way to brighten up your image without going to exposure. So bring my oranges up some. Pull back out. Look at my yellows. I want this to be a little bit brighter of an image. My greens, I'm going to brighten that up as well. So you can see the edges of the greens up there. Aqua, I'll leave that alone. All right, and the other ones didn't really affect. So hue, probably leave my oranges alone. Yeah, because it makes it look kind of funny. Yellows, I don't need to push it to the green. I'm actually going to push it down a little bit to the orange. There we go. Greens, I want it to, if I want it to look more fall, I could really take that out. I call my greens yellows. But I want my greens to be a little bit more punchy. I'm probably going to bring down the vibrance on this here in a second too. Aqua is not really affecting anything. And then my blues, let's see. Yeah, don't want to do that. This is like a cheap way if people wanted to make everything teal. You can bring your blues all the way down. All right, so color mixer's done, color grading's done, lens correction. Not doing any of these other stuff. I'm not going to mess with the calibration on this one. The next thing I'll do is my, general settings. So let's see my highlights. Open up my highlights a little bit. I'm going to open them up a little bit. Shadows as well, just a tad to kind of make it that, bright sunshiny thing. Leave my whites alone. Bring my shadows back down just a tad. And the whites, I could open it up like this where it looks like I'm shooting direct sun, but I don't want to do that. So, because I still want some contrast in this. Bring my blacks down some. Then I'm going to bring my dehaze down a little bit. That'll give it more of that brighter sensation. Bring my vibrance down so it's not so punchy. There we go. And so again, I'm always about separating my subject from the background. I'm going to bring this in just a hair over. There we go. That way a third of it is kind of water, third is the subject, and then I have the third as the sky. So I'm kind of punching it in just a tad. I've centered on this. There we go. All right, so let's do some masking here. This is a little bit too bright. Actually, let me go back down. This is not a professional editing session here, so. Color mixer, my luminance. Those yellows are a bit too bright for my liking. Let me bring my oranges back down some. It's the greens. That's better. So those little things, as all of you notice. So I'm going to bring my brightness, my overall exposure back down now that I've made the edits. All right, so I'm going to click my subject. I'm going to bring my subject up a hair on the exposure. You don't want to do a lot because, again, it makes it look funky. I'm at 0.17. You don't want to be the guy that's like, yeah, look how exposed here. It just doesn't look natural. Just a hair. So let me go back down. 118. Let me open up my shadows a little bit, open them up some, bring the whites up just a tad. I'd rather bring my whites up before I bring my exposure up so I can brighten them up some. There we go. So just the subject, the auto masking is pretty good on this. If not, you can always do a brush and the brush in. So let me do the background, everything but the subject. And I'm going to do what I did in the last one where I'm going to bring down the darkness a bit of the background. So I'm going to do it with the blacks first. I'll leave the overall exposure. It's a little too strong. Again, when you bring down the blacks, you're going to get those colors popping out some more. And then let me bring up the, there we go. So did just a touch on the temperature. Let me remove show overlay. Let me remove all of this down here now. So again, this is just to, I need to bring my flow and density back up. There it is. That's why it's still red. So the idea for this is I've got this natural kind of barrier going across here with the grass over here, grass here, my subject. So it makes sense that the light would hit here and then maybe in the shadow behind him a bit. Now you still have some light coming in on the top, but this is kind of an easier way to not easier way, but a simpler way to kind of separate them from the background some. I could darken up this a little bit back here though. Let me see. Let me add a little bit more back into this. So another brush again. I don't know if you can even see anything with that. There we go. There we go. And then over here, I'm still in the main mask. I can go over here to the slider and do the amounts that it's pushed in. I'll do that just a hair. Yeah, let me pull it back just a little bit, actually. All right, my vibrance is down, saturation's down. Actually, I kind of like how this looks right here. There's a lot of the water spray going around. I'm going to push in just a touch more. There we go. And then if I wanted to crop it for Instagram, you go over here to 4.5 or 4x5 so you can edit it specifically for Instagram. This is what it would look like on Instagram. I'd probably give them more headspace if I was going to edit this specifically just for Instagram, but I'll leave it with the original aspect ratio. Have them just slightly off so we got more of that space. There we go. I get really weird when it comes to cropping. I always take my time on that. But that's the general stuff. Again, I just did a few mask on him, separate him from the background, add some colors into the shadows and highlights. And then if you look at the before and after, this is what we're looking at. More natural skin tones when you go through it like this. Trees, more natural greens. And then he's not blending in with that flat background more. He's separated from that background. So going from him to Kai, it's kind of the same thing. And I always go back and just double check my stuff because, as we all know, we sometimes will come back after an editing session like, what was I doing? So like even coming back to this one, now I want to bring the saturation down just a little bit, bring the vibrance down just a little bit. There we go. Something like that. All right, so that's my general idea for a few of the sessions that we did. I might go through some more if you guys find this interesting or slow it down a bit. I just kind of did this a little fast, but it gives you an idea of what my headspace is. Again, just adding colors in. Use the tone curve. Don't go crazy on that one. Just bring all your levels up slightly. It kind of helps open up the image some more, gives it some natural looking contrast versus using the contrast slider, which sometimes just doesn't always look natural. Separate your subject from the background and then just don't overdo it on the color saturation. Use the luminance slider to add in contrast and brightness in parts of the image. And then you can get really specific when it comes to the brush tool. So again, I didn't do it on this one, but I could get in here and really darken up the parts, lighten up the back there, add in a few more details like that. So hope this helps, guys.